post-war, when some off-site housing was of poor quality. It's ruined the industry in many ways because people remember that phase. So quality and performance is what it's all about. So we've spent a lot of effort, and we've got representatives of another scheme here today, spent a lot of effort to put in place assurance, so that's assured process, assured quality, etc., and insurance. And there's no better name in the market in many ways than Lloyd's. It travels really well internationally and so on. BLP Allianz is one of the insurances that's embedded. RICS, the surveyors get it. They get it in a big way, because part of this is a database. So in the future, when you return to a property, you're there to tell precisely how it's been constructed, etc., etc., rather than turn up, I don't know how it's built, therefore I will prejudice its mortgage in the future. You will know how it's built and how it's performing and so on and so forth. It has the backing of the mortgage lenders, and the four leading mortgage lenders have backed it. And they've said that they will grant mortgage against products that have gone through this process over 60 years, which is essentially, they use 2 mortgage terms equals 60 years. We know that's not true, but that's the technique. So it makes sure that products out of this stable are mortgageable for the future. Well, that's great. And I think that's how it should be. It should get rid of a lot of issues and of confidence and so on in the marketplace. The big boys get it as well. This is a huge scheme, multi-storey, no problem. Big developers are using off-site. This is Skanska, only 4,000 new apartments. I think this is one of the tallest. Yes, they get it. It's the only way to do schemes of that size in their view. You go to St. Petersburg, huge schemes being managed and being delivered by teams from this country, would you believe? So we are ahead of the pack in many ways, but we don't realise it, perhaps. Let's move on to where we are with housing in this country. And this comes out of the report. I don't know if you can read all the figures, but self-build's quite small. And this is about a year ago. About 7,000 per annum. Government's interested in that, because if you go to Germany, it's a very different figure. It's a very large proportion of the houses are built by self-build techniques, using subcontractors and so on and standard products. If you look at the house builders, 75,000 per annum. Okay, perhaps we don't know whether that's big, small, or indifferent. Private rental, 4,000 per annum, not very big, but that's changed a bit, and I'll come on to that. Housing associations, 28,000 per annum. So that's the way we try to divide the market. But look what's happening. The blue, the dark blue and the light blue, is public money. The red is private money, private house builders. If you look at private house builders, they get a good kicking quite regularly about not building enough or too much and so on. It's not, all right, it goes up and down a bit, and there's certainly a plunge 2010, but it's fairly constant. And they've got a vested interest in keeping that constant. They've got a business to run, they want to make profits year on year, they've got their shareholders, etc. So they're all geared up to constant supply. So they buy their land, so they've got a land bank, they develop the sites out at a steady rate because they want a steady business which is doing well. What is worrying to me about this graph is what's happened to the social sector, public money. It's very, very light. And that's one of the things that I have real worries about. That picture is compounded by what's happening to our families, where occupancy levels are on the increase. And if you look at people per dwelling, you're getting less people per dwelling. Blue line is UK, actually it's England, but okay. Blue line is England, red line is Germany. So in fact we're getting less people per dwelling. I think that's probably starting to straight line. Germany is continuing to drop. But that's another very significant factor. So when you start to forecast what the needs are, and you'll see in the press quite a lot about our needs for housing, etc. Most of those statistics come out of the work we did. Things like the Lyons Report and so on and so forth are using the work that we put together. You look at the growth in terms of millions. When we put that back onto the earlier plot, what do we need then to achieve those millions? Well, from a standing start, we've got to get up here, year on year, if we're going to have an impact. And these are the ones that are being bandied about in the industry. You will have seen this. How do we do that? The other salient point is that some people have picked up, if we get back to these levels, we actually increase GDP by 3%. Now, isn't that something that government and the politicians shouldn't be interested in? And if we can manage that to get up to those levels, then it actually helps the whole economy. But, unfortunately, it probably needs money to come in at the bottom end to get us there. Let's look then at what that might look like if we were trying to hit those figures. Well, self-build, yeah, we could increase that, couldn't we? It's only small. Government saying to local authorities, please will you designate your plans and inclusion for the self-build market. Fine, that's right, good. And it is getting more sophisticated. It's pretty good. And of course there's all sorts of opportunities there for supplying that market with partially constructed product and so on. Then we're saying, build for sale. Could the private house builders get up to around 140,000 per annum? Or 170 there as well. Oh, that's ambitious. The answer is, not at the moment they couldn't. They've got real problems in extending both their supply of land, because they work on a 6 or 10-year land bank, a lot of the big boys. They've also got a problem, as we heard earlier, with their skills. And if they start to try and boost this, they're going to suck in labour, probably from overseas, probably from Eastern Europe. They're probably going to have to suck in materials as well. And it takes the brick industry quite a long time to gear up and open up new factories once the supply chain is broken, and it's been broken for a number of years. So there's issues there, big issues. Build for private rental, well, I don't know if you recall the previous figures, that's a huge jump. But it is an area which is showing quite a lot of growth, and quite an interesting area, and I'll come on to that later. This is the one that I really desperately would like us to see dealing with, because I've been doing some other work for Joseph Rowntree Foundation, and the link between poverty, section 106, social housing, is quite worrying. But we need desperately more social housing, and we're not getting the right social housing in the right place. That's the other thing, it's not a one size fits all. We tend to get in the press that this or that or this or that, but in fact the picture across the country is very, very different. So some local authorities have dealt with this and it's working really well. Others, there's desperate problems. And yes, you can imagine the southeast and London in particular, there's some really big problems developing, where some local authorities are having to move some of their population to other boroughs and so on and so forth to accommodate them. Just think what that does socially and so on. It's worrying. So what does the market look like in the future? And this is the other influence. The market is really out of step in terms of what it pays for its buildings. There's I didn't put it in this pack and I regretted it after, but there's a nice little graph in here, or on the website, which shows where the money goes when you build a house in the conventional way. And the house builders were not very keen on us putting it in our report, but we did, because it shows the actual build cost of a house is probably less than a third of the cost of a house. So where does all the money go? Well, it's on land, it's on profit, design, marketing, so on. The house builder, fair enough, they've got to get a turn on their money. It's also on Section 106 and SIL. So we think about housing as being expensive. It's actually not that expensive. There's too many demands on it as well. So that's another thing that we've got to keep in consideration when we discuss these things. So what's a picture of the people who are going to provide our houses? You look at the sector, there's only a few major house builders who produce large numbers. Very, very few. And I worry they look a bit like peas out of a pod, don't they? They all produce a very similar product. They all watch one another. They frequently work together, which is good. But there is a commonality here. But they only account for quite a small proportion of the market. And this middle ground is made up of small builders and medium-sized builders. Some of the medium-sized builders were specialists. But in this recession we've had, they've tended to disappear. So we've got another issue here about who's going to deliver our housing. And we've heard earlier, car industry. Well, let's look at other industries and what they do and how they do it. Should we be looking at, should we learn from this? Should we be learning from boat building? Should we be learning from creating aircraft? Should we? Certainly, if you think about the car industry, it was really down some years. We lost our car industry virtually at one stage. But we're back, and we're probably one of the most efficient places to build cars now. So we have the skills in this country to manufacture. I believe that's where we should go for the future, if this country is going to be prosperous and do things well. And look, you don't have to have a standard product out of a common platform, the basic shell, or chassis, or what, chassis if you're old like me, but common platform. You can produce an awful lot of different brands, let alone different products. So we really need to learn from this, and I think the big thing to learn from the car industry and a lot of the industrial sector now is product and process. And process, the big one I think for our industry, is the supply chain. We are still doing the things the same way as we did them 100 years ago. Slight variations, but the same procedure goes on in our industry as took place probably 100 years ago. So where is the multi-skilling in the construction industry? Where are the products from our supply chain which provide a complete light set? You don't have to sort it out. It goes click on the production line. Where are the, I don't know, the engines are produced miles away? We don't have that sort of supply chain. And we should do, I think. So, what next? Where is the Henry Ford of future housing systems? Maybe there's a germ of it here today, and I really do think that what is happening in our sector at the moment is quite exciting. There are a number of companies that are looking at these techniques. I'm confident we're not going to make the mistakes of yesteryear. We have the technology, we have the knowledge, we know how buildings perform, we know about damp and condensation and ventilation and so on and so forth. We have the ability to make buildings really perform effectively. So I think this is all about good timing. We're at the right place at the right time. I also would just add very quickly about some of the things that we've been talking about. The government has recognised that training and skills need to be different in our industry. And UK CES has got 6 projects on at the moment. I'm involved with 2 of them and other bits and pieces, where they're looking at the training for our sector and what is needed. So instead of repeating what we've repeated for 100 years, suddenly we're looking at the skill sets that are needed for the future. So that's all very good stuff. Very short periods, only 6 months grant money to do this. But for instance, Skanska are starting a proper training school for off-site. And if they do it, it's going to be good. And they're looking from top to bottom. They're looking from PhDs at one end and guys on the site and on the shop floor at the other end, and everything in between. I've been talking to these exercises about we must adopt. What's happening is you look back at when we're talking about rental, social rental and private rental, there's some exciting developments with investors. And I suggest to you, if you get the opportunity, watch what's happening with Kier and Kent County Council, Legal and General as the funders. There's pension money, big money elsewhere that finds it difficult to find a home these days to make a good return. It does work for this sort of sequence, if I can remember it. Local authority has land. Local authorities do have issues about right to buy, because if they build out and then people buy that building product, they've got a net loss, and it's very difficult. But right, local authorities got land, they want to build out that land. They go to a contractor, Kier, who will agree to build it out for a fixed price. Kier, along with the local authority, will go to a funder, Legal and General, who'll say, we'll take the rental stream from this on a lease over a long period of time. We will get an RSL or a social landlord of some sort to run the properties and manage them, etc., etc. At the end of that process, we're happy we've got our return, says Legal and General. The property goes back to the local authority. So they've retained their asset and they have something valuable for the future to let out or put in the social sector again, etc., etc. And in some places that formula works very well at the moment. It's all to do with rental levels, and it's all to do with land costs and the fact that the land is easier to carry on doing the old model. I don't know how we break that one.